Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, Paul. Today we are honored to have literary agent, author, and publisher Bill Gladstone as our guest. Bill has worked with literary giants Marie Kondo, Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra. He and his impressively, he and his literary agency have placed more than 5,000 titles with dozens of publishers. That's pretty big stuff. Today, however, we will focus on Bill Gladstone, the author and deep thinker. Bill is an international expert on indigenous cultures, holding a degree in medical anthropology from Yale University and a graduate degree in cultural anthropology from Harvard. Our discussion today is spanning the globe. We will be exploring the Tao, the similarities of three monotheistic religions, miracle healings, and what I'm really excited about, the notions of softer and deeper realities. Bill has really keen ideas on that. Yes, as it sounds, today we will take an adventurous deep dive. With that, let's welcome Bill Gladstone on the show. Bill, welcome to the next chapter.
Thank you so much. That's a beautiful introduction.
Was
Just
it?
One modification. My undergraduate degree is actually in Hispanic Studies and Literature from Yale College, and then my medical anthropology degree is from Harvard University.
Oh, okay.
But the reason I mention it, it's not, I don't care so much about what my degrees are, but literature is really my love. That's what started me on my career. That's why I'm a writer. I wrote my thesis at Yale, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Oh, did you really? Oh, I love that book.
One of the greatest novels, if not the greatest novel.
Yeah, if not the greatest.
100 years.
Now, let me type this down really quickly so I have it when I produce the show notes. Your undergraduate degree was in what?
Hispanic Studies, they called it back then, because it was both Hispanic literature and history. So I studied South American history as well as Spanish history and literature from all Spanish-speaking countries.
Do you speak Spanish?
Yes. I taught Spanish, in fact, for a year.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's impressive.
I love the Spanish culture.
I'm a big fan of the Spanish culture. I took a holiday maybe 3 years ago. We went to Peru and went to Machu Picchu, and
I'm one of the last human beings to sleep in Machu Picchu in the ruins.
Seriously?
So it was 1972.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a while back.
Yeah, it was a while back.
And I love the syncretism between the Inca religion of Pachamama and Christianity, and the way they, now in some circles, that's heresy to do that, but the way they put that together, I felt was absolutely brilliant. I love the idea of the sky, the earth, and below in what they call Pachamama.
That discussion later on in the interview, because that links back to the Tao and the universality of all world religions.
Okay, let's get on that. But let's hold off just a sec, because what I thought we might begin our time with together is I'd like to talk about a book that you have become quite fond of. It is a rewrite of Norman Vincent Peale's The Power of Positive Thinking. An author, Hassan Abdullah Ismaik, am I pronouncing his name correctly?
Yes, you're correct.
Ismaik has reimagined Peale's original book, entitled his new effort, The Power of Positive Thinking, Interfaith 21st Century Edition. Tell me what it is about this book that you find it so important.
Okay, well, first of all, it's not really a reimagined version. It is the original version with additional material added to it. So The Power of Positive Thinking, Interfaith 21st Century Edition contains 100% of the advice of Norman Vincent Peale. Norman Vincent Peale was a pastor in New York City. He wrote The Power of Positive Thinking in 1952.
Right.
Norman Vincent Peale gave many lectures throughout the country. He had his own radio show. He had his own magazine publishing. And he was one of the most influential members of any religious organization in the history of the United States. Some of your younger audience might think of people like Billy Graham. Norman Vincent Peale had a greater outreach than Billy Graham. And Billy Graham, as you know, had a big outreach. In terms of contemporary people for this generation, I don't think there's anyone who comes even close. And what made Norman Vincent Peale so appealing was that he was a practical person. He was always meeting with members of his congregation who had the same problems that everybody else has. He wasn't just holding forth for people who were dedicated churchgoers. They were churchgoers, but many of them were not, completely aligned with all the principles of the Bible. And it was Norman Vincent Peale's opinion that within the Bible contained fantastic information for solving practical problems. And so when he wrote this book, I'll just read a little bit from the table of contents. It's believe in yourself. A peaceful mind generates power. How to have constant energy. Try prayer power. How to create your own happiness. Stop fuming and fretting. Expect the best and get it. I don't believe in defeat. So these chapters, in each case, provide a story of someone who is seeking solutions to everyday issues. And what Norman Vincent Peale did is he found passages in the Bible that supported positive thinking and that explained what positive thinking is. And what Hassan did, which was so brilliant, is he had been influenced by his father, who read a version of this book. I don't know whether he read it in English or he read it in Arabic. The book's been translated into 42 languages. But it impressed upon Hassan the value of the advice of Norman Vincent Peale. So Hassan, who is the youngest and first billionaire in the history of Jordan, wanted to do something to share with his people and with others. Hassan's a very intellectual person. He reads Hebrew as well as Arabic as well as English. And he went out and did research with the holy books of the Jewish tradition as well as the Quran and found passages that were nearly identical to the passages that Norman Vincent Peale had selected to illustrate his advice. And so that's why it's called the Interfaith Edition. So why I'm excited about this book is not only is it reviving very sound practical advice that, has the book has sold over 20 million copies. It's obviously...
The new book
20
has?
million copies unless you're successful. But now it brings the book back to life, and it brings it back in what I feel is a more important context, because it shows that, no, you don't have to even be a Christian. You don't have to believe in the Bible. You can be a Muslim. You can be Jewish. And in reality, you don't have to follow any of these faiths, but you'll see the commonality in terms of the wisdom of each of these three sacred books.
You're speaking my language, because as my listeners know, I'm a student and devotee of the late medieval Christian mystics and also the 21st century Christian mystics, and there's a very openness among mystics to the monotheistic religions.
Well, it's interesting you say mystic, because my other good friend and client, Eckhart Tolle, what he has identified is that institutions become what he calls pain bodies. They're kind of like the ego of the institution. But the mystic tradition is where the soul, where the original creative juice of the religion resides. And that is why I believe all of the major religions throughout the world, at their core, are tapping into the same essence. And then, things get interpreted over time. Politics gets involved, economics gets involved, the structure of the hierarchies, and things lose some of their original intent and creates what I feel are the divisions that have, created so much disharmony, when the actual religious messages, the spiritual essence of each of these world religions is about unity. That's why we have the Parliament of World Religions. People recognize that fundamentally all of the world's religions are identical in terms of the basic principles. I was fortunate and also made a film called In Search of the Historical Jesus, and I interviewed the Dalai Lama, and I interviewed the head of the Greek Orthodox Church, and Hindus and mystics, and every major religious leader in the world at that time. And the basic principles of all the world religions are the same. the golden rule, love thy neighbor, be kind, be merciful. These are messages that are universal. And so, my hope is that through the power of positive thinking, Interfaith 21st Century Edition, we're going to return to an awareness that what unites us spiritually is more important than that which separates us.
You're really speaking my language because as much as I support churches, there is some sort of dogmatism and legalism that's going on in religion that is not talking about. I love those chapter headings that you said of Norman Vincent Peale. He was, my goodness, this guy was 60 years ahead of his time, because what he's saying right now is very applicable today. These are messages that people in faith traditions are not really focusing on today. And it's the question that people are asking, especially young people. The baby boomers are just satisfied hanging in there, but the younger people are not satisfied with that and are asking questions. What is real? What is truth? How do I live a life that is consistent with creation intent?
And how do you combine flexibility with pillars of truth? Because what draws us to spiritual tradition? What draws us to these major religions? There are pillars of truth within them. But, for example, Pope Francis, he's saying, wait a second, let's not be so dogmatic. Let's think about the role of women in the church. Let's be a little more flexible. And this, I think, is happening. I don't know as much in terms of what's going on with the Jewish religions and the Muslim religions, but I'm hoping that there's starting to be an awareness that just because something has worked for 400 or 500 years, you have to go deeper. What parts have been working and what parts have not? And let's show a little discrimination between what works and what doesn't and focus on what works.
Yeah, and it's not 300 or 400 years. If you take Christianity, you can take it back to 5,000. 5,000.
Yeah.
And so it's quite a bit. I think, what would you? I'm going to admit that I have not, believe it or not. I mean, I read quite a bit. I've never read The Power of Positive Thinking.
Well, I encourage you to. It's a light, easy read. I hadn't read it for about 30 years, and obviously when we decided to publish the book, I reread it, and it was just a matter of 3 or 4 hours for the entire book, because it's so familiar. When you pick up the book, and the story
is this so the new book or the original book?
The original. I'm talking about The Power of Positive Thinking,
okay.
Interfaith 21st Century Edition. Yeah, I mean, even though it's almost 300 pages, it's a very fast read.
And what am I going to walk away with? What does Hassan
it depends
give
on
to
who
me?
You are and what your issue is right now. But you're going to walk away feeling better about yourself and better about the world and feeling more hopeful about the world situation. We have within each of us the ability to solve our own problems. We have the ability to tap into something, whether you want to call it God, you want to call it Jesus, you want to call it Allah, whatever you call it is fine, because it's real. And there is, and Norman Vincent Peale, and this 70 years ago, was talking about the power of prayer in healing, the power of positive psychological attitude in dealing with any situations, including health situations. He posits in 1952 that 90% of medical conditions could be alleviated through mental and emotional activity, changing your approach. That's why it's called the power of positive thinking. Obviously, if you have a broken bone, go to a doctor and get the bone fixed. But if you're suffering from depression, yes, today we have all these fabulous medicines, so be careful because they all seem to have side effects. But there's a lot you can do just in changing your attitude, just in changing your behavior. One of the simplest things Vincent Peale talked about is just go into nature, just go into the park, just go for a walk on the beach. These very simple ideas can actually have significant value to you, particularly if you're in a crisis.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Emerson and Thoreau when you talk about that, how strongly they were into nature and how nature impacts their life today. You know, it's interesting you would say that. I have a client that I do pro bono in Africa, and she's a business owner who deals with, she's got some stomach issues, and the doctors continue to say you have nothing medical wrong with you. And I know as I've spoken with her, you know, I've been through enough therapy to be dangerous. I'm not a therapist. I don't try to be a therapist. But at least have some background in it. And it's obvious to me that she is, you know, anxiety and depression ridden, and she needs to get rid of that, and we're working on that. Now, I happen to be an advocate of medications, you know, because I have medications that have no side effects. You know, I mean, if I do, I don't know the side effects. But you know, there are brain synapses, you know, with the serotonins and the dopamines that if those are not fixed, it's going to be difficult, in my opinion.
And don't misinterpret what I said earlier. I'm a big advocate of Western medicine. I happen to suffer from gout. I take allopurinol every single day. Without it, I'd be in significant pain. Medicine is marvelous, and the advances in the last 30, 40 years are amazing, and many of the medicines are great. But what Norman Vincent Peale was suggesting, and this was at a time when there were fewer medicines, is that there's a lot you can do on your own that, whether you're taking medicines or not, is going to make your resolution of the challenges in your life, whether it's he talks about things like a broken heart. How many of us, you know, go into a deep depression if, you know, our loved one, or the one we think is our loved one, decides the relationship is over? Very painful and real. And you need to go through a grieving process with it. And that's just one example from the power of positive thinking that, you know, is addressed, and in a lighthearted enough way that it's accessible to anyone. It's not telling you not to grieve. It's not trying to give you some, you know, way of avoiding the pain. It's just giving you advice on how to deal with the pain.
That's terrific. It sounds like a great book. I think I don't think I will pick that up and give that a read. I have it on the show notes with a link to Amazon, so so I know exactly how to get it. Anything else that you wanted to elaborate on in The Power of Positive Thinking, Interfaith 21st Century?
It's a really important book that should be shared and that can be given without bias to anyone. It doesn't matter whether someone believes or doesn't believe. The advice is solid. My own mother was an agnostic her entire life. It doesn't matter. You don't have to believe in, quote, God per se to benefit from this book. And you don't have to, you know, be a member of the Christian religion or the Muslim religion or the Jewish religion. The book is still helpful.
Yeah, eternal truths are eternal truths, and it now your belief component does impact it. There is an effect, but if you don't have that belief component, there's practical daily advantages of following the wisdom that is written.
Simplify it to its most basic, power of positive thinking. You're going to benefit more if you think the glass is half full than if you think the glass is half empty.
There you go.
Just take that, if nothing else, and, you know, run with it and see where it takes you.
You know, Bill, I graduated from I call it the seminary with a redundant name. I'm Episcopalian now, but I call the seminary with a redundant name. It was Western Conservative Baptist. Like, you know, what is it going to be, Western Liberal Baptist? I mean, you know. And I graduated that school with an observation that has stayed with me. That was in 85. And an observation that stays with me today is that the Bible, taught by many people, is a legal corpus. And instead of a legal corpus, it is a wisdom text. It is an internal, you know,
I'm so glad to hear you make that distinction, because I also teach a course on the Tao, and the Tao is a book of wisdom. And what's missing in today's world is an appreciation of wisdom. One of the reasons I loved 100 Years of Solitude so much when I was, you know, a young undergraduate was the wisdom in the book. Great literature is full of wisdom. What is lacking in the world today is focus on wisdom. Everyone is focused on the latest gizmo, the latest technology, the latest medical breakthrough. These are all important. But without wisdom, what good does it do? It really does not serve humanity just to make progress for the sake of progress, just to earn money for the sake of money. It's the wisdom of how are you going to use your resources, how are you going to live your life, how are you going to improve life, not just for yourself and your family, but for your community and for the world.
Absolutely.
Because without wisdom, none of that will happen. And that is really the crisis of our present civilization.
And you know what?
People too concerned about their own immediate survival, not looking at the big picture.
Precisely. I was going to say the problem with wisdom is the only problem with wisdom, as I have discovered, you have to get old to find it.
Well, there's
I mean, you're getting wise, but I'm 73 and I'm much different now than I ever was.
Yeah. Well, part of it, I hate to say this, but I'm getting older. Part of it is the wisdom of age, and the wisdom that is brought through suffering. No matter, I mean, I've had a blessed life, very, very little suffering compared to real suffering. But we all deal, with what we're calibrated to deal with, and it is sometimes through suffering that you have your greatest breakthroughs and eventually your greatest happiness, because you have a greater appreciation. And the appreciation is just as important as the experience.
Yeah, I like what you said earlier about the distinction between, I don't know if you called it religion and the mystics, but that the mystics go to an entirely different part of our being. It goes to it goes to the inside. It is not a head. It is not a head-oriented.
Yeah, what
discipline.
I would say, the word I would use is soul. It's the soul of the religion. The mysticism is the soul of the religion. And it's very interesting. We represent all kinds of books. I have a novelist who's just written this incredible science fiction, multi-planetary book. Maybe it'll be the next Star Trek. I don't know. But one of the crises in the book is AI. And will AI, artificial intelligence, take over the world? And in this fantasy book, there's planets where 90% of the population is AI, but only 10% remain actual human beings. And so I just wrote him an email saying, well, I'm not sure of the premise, but I'm voting that somehow the soul of the universe prevails over AI. Because the one thing artificial intelligence doesn't have is a soul. And that, to me, whether we're talking about wisdom, we're talking about the soul of the universe, the soul of each individual, when religious, spiritual visionaries talk about eternal life, they're really talking about the life of the soul.
They are talking about the life of the soul, and they are talking about, in my tradition, that we are talking about an intimate relationship with the divine. It is not about walking around in heaven in the gold streets and having a fun time and all that. It's what it is about. The one thing we are missing is the love of the divine, and that's true in all your religions. And that
absolutely, I get goosebumps when I hear you say that, because it's the experience of being the love of the divine that is the ultimate level of enlightenment in the practice of Taoism and Buddhism and many other Eastern religions. It's actually attaining, people probably have heard the word nirvana. When you're in nirvana, you have attained melding with the love of the source, the love that permeates the universe, the love which, in all probability, created the universe.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've read a bit of the Sufis and the Kabbalah, so the mystics of the Muslims and the mystics of the Jewish faith. I've just read through them. I've not read them deeply. I do intend to pursue them more. But love and care and doing good for other people. What's really interesting is the great mystics of the late medieval times, Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Francis of Assisi, Bonaventure, Meister Eckhart, they all will say you can have your great devotional prayer times, But at the same time, if you are not serving your community and you are not serving people in need, you are failing. You are not developing intimacy with God, because intimacy with God, to the degree that you love other people and that you love yourself, I might add, to the degree that you do both of those, are equal the degree to which you love God. And you understand in a whole different perspective the love that God has for you. Is that God has suffered, they call it long suffering.
I think that, your listeners can have, at least those who are of our generation. If you have grandchildren, you immediately can understand the joy that you see and that you experience with your grandchildren. If you could have that experience with everyone on the planet, if you felt that way about everyone on the planet, wanting to see them develop, wanting to see them have their own joyful experiences, if you could take that energy and live it daily with everyone you encounter, and if everyone did that, I guarantee we would literally have heaven on earth.
It's funny, I'm a big fan of, I don't know, are you familiar with Richard Rohr?
No.
He's sort of like one of the major deep-thinking theologians of the day, but he's Franciscan, so he's mendicant, he's poor, and he has a Center for Action and Contemplation, and it's quite successful. And I mean, they do a lot of good work. And I read a quote by him. I'm reading a book by his right now that I think is the best book I've ever read on Christianity, and I've read a few. And he says, our role is not to change people's minds. And that was, when I read that, I thought, how many times, Bill, have we had debates, discussions, arguments with somebody else about some point, and tell me in those discussions which person ever changed their mind?
I can't remember a single time.
They didn't, and so it was just, what is that all about? I don't,
What
I
changes
refuse.
people's mind, in my experience, are acts of kindness. If someone that you disagree with treats you kindly, it forces you to reevaluate everything about that person. And that is the most effective way to create change, because then it comes from within the other person and it's not imposed on the other person.
Well, Bill Gladstone, we would be friends. We think so similarly, and yet you bring another window that's very helpful. I want to ask one question before we take a break, because I'm very into, you've talked about the Tao. Now, I have read the Tao maybe 6 or 8 times.
You're just a beginner. Until you're up to 60 times, you're just a beginner.
But you know what I do is I journal on it every time I read it.
Yeah.
I don't just read it, so it will take me 2 months to read the 80-page book.
Just so you know, we're only on chapter 28. I do this course an hour a week, and we're on chapter 28, and it's taken us a whole year.
Yeah, my son is 30
year.
yeand really
50 hours to go through the first 28 chapters.
Yeah, it is the wisdom. Lao Tzu just and he and the beauty that he didn't make all this.
I've read a lot. When I was at Yale, before I decided to major in Hispanic studies, I was a philosophy major. I read Spinoza. I love Spinoza. He was my guy. But I read everybody: Plato, Kant, you name them. There's never been a thinker as profound, in my opinion, as Lao Tzu.
What do you think made him different? And I mean, he was different from all of the other philosophers of the age.
He must have had extraterrestrial contact. I don't know any other explanation. I really don't. He was so wise. He was tapped into an energy that very few ever tap into. He had a level of discernment so that he was able to see the impermanence and the illusionary nature of everyday reality. And that's why when you read Lao Tzu, he says things which at first seem ridiculous. He says, don't use strength, use weakness. Cultivate the baby state. Be like a baby. If you're in conflict with someone, don't address the conflict directly. Just support through kindness and what he calls nature's way. And the illustration of nature's way is water. Water will sink to the lowest level. Water will follow any course that it's provided. If there's a boulder, it'll go around the boulder. And if there's, putrid sewage at the bottom of the hill, the water will just flow into the putrid sewage and not complain, because the water is here to serve life. So these are the kinds of images and advice that you get in this book. And the first time you read it, particularly if you're coming from a, sort of get-it-done Western perspective, A-plus personality like I have, it's like, this makes no sense. If I did this, everybody would beat me. But then you read deeper and deeper, and you start understanding, no, Lao Tzu's actually right. But it's not something that you're going to get the very first time you read it.
It's amazing. I want to take a quick break and continue on with this engaging conversation. So we'll be right back. Just hang in there. Hi there, this is Charlie Hedges, and you are listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie, and my very special guest today is Bill Gladstone, who comes to us incredibly credentialed, incredibly successful, and just a very bright thinker. And as he just announced over the break, he's going to get a glass of water, so I guess until he returns, it's just going to be me chattering about our discussion. Now, I am a student of several different traditions. I study them because I think the world brings to us wisdom in so many different ways.
Are we back?
We are back now, yeah. Okay. And I've been
I took an
rambling.
extra minute because the sun is setting.
Hang the podcast. I got a sunset I need to watch. I get it. I love it. That's beautiful. That's kind of like what we were talking about. As you were talking about Lao Tzu, it made me think of wabi-sabi. Are you familiar with the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi?
I know wasabi, but wabi-sabi, no.
Yeah, no. This is not the hot stuff that you eat with sushi.
Hot stuff. I'm making a joke.
No,
I'm not familiar.
No, this is. It is about. It reminds us that all things, including us and our life itself, are impermanent, incomplete, and imperfect. I just think that's. I find that so beautiful. And I find it so refreshing, and to know that everything is fresh and new. Every day, T.S. Eliot wrote in Four Quartets, I think it was East Coker, and he wrote that every end is a beginning and every beginning is an end. I have written, we are not changing so much as we are transforming. Change requires dropping something and starting something else. I like the idea of transformation, or perhaps even evolution, with a small e, that we are evolving into a better self.
This, it reminds me of, miracle soul healer, Dr. and Master Shah.
Oh, good. That was on my list.
I've just rewritten the biography that I originally wrote about 10 years ago, and I've updated it. And the reason, he is really the teacher of Lao Tzu. I'm just the host of the show. And I've learned so much from Master Shah. And one of the things I've learned is when he describes the opening chapter in the Tao Te Ching, and it's his interpretation, so, those of you who are reading other translations, it may come across a little differently. But for Master Shah, and I do believe Master Shah is the best translator of Lao Tzu I've ever come across, he explains that the world of things and the world of emptiness were both created by the Tao. And then he further explains that the world of things is actually less powerful than the world of emptiness. And the reason for that is exactly what you just said. The world of emptiness contains infinite potential. The world of things is limited. As soon as you name something, as soon as you identify the qualities of something, it loses its eternal nature.
Oh my
It's
goodness,
limited.
that is so true.
Whereas what is unnamed is limitless. And actually, this also reminds me in one of the chapters of 100 Years of Solitude, which is about this little town in the jungle there in Colombia, Marie Kondo. It's a fictional place, but there's a point in the novel where they have the plague of, I don't know what you call it, when you lose your memory. So they couldn't remember the name of anything, and they had to go around and put tags and recreate the world through names. But the spiritual lesson here is that there is infinite potential in the unknown, infinite becoming in the unknown. And according to Dr. Master Sha, there's creation, and then there's reverse creation. So 1 creates 2, 2 creates 3, 3 creates 10,000, which in Chinese means infinite objects, infinite. And then you have reverse creation, where everything will return to nothing, because everything is impermanent. This planet will cease to exist. Now, maybe it's 1 billion years, maybe it's 1 trillion years, but
maybe it's 100 years. We don't know.
Years, the human beings may cease, but I don't think the planet.
Oh, correct. I misunderstood.
But the actual planet, no matter what we do, and obviously we're human beings. If we live 100 years, we consider well done, But the universe doesn't think in terms of 100 years.
13 billion years. What 100 years is not. It's
not even a second in.
It's not even 2 words in the 500-page book on it.
Yeah. So you have to keep things in perspective. Now, all that aside, it's very important. Our 100 years, or 400 years, if you include, maybe my grandchildren, great grandchildren, whatever it is, that time is allotted to you and your offspring. It's important. It's important how you spend that time. It's important the experiences you create. It's important the world that you create. And guess what? No one is more powerful than you. And I mean that to everyone. Every single human being is equally involved in the co-creation of this planet. Now, somebody who's, in a minimum wage job or, something may feel they're not as powerful as someone who's running the government. But ultimately, the collective energy of each and every human being is equal.
Yeah, I have a friend who does a lot of consulting around power, and her approach is not power over, but power to. Mm-hmm. And that is that you don't have to be wealthy, a senator, or some very influential person over society to have power to. That power to is, it sounds to me like much of the power of positive thinking. It is the power to.
Positive thinking. Also, just in terms of, just look at the world situation. I mean, I don't know all the details of the poor woman who, died in Iran, but she was just posthumously selected as one of the 100 most powerful females of the last year. All she did, she was just an ordinary person, but she defied a law, and I don't even think she defied the law, but the way that she was wearing her covering, I guess, wasn't exactly the way they wanted. But that one individual has set off a chain of events which is dramatically impacting the world. And I'm not saying pro con about anything. I'm not getting involved in the politics of it, but just as an example, you never know what impact your action, no matter what your status in life, is going to have on other human beings. So don't ever discount the value of your own behavior, because it's much more significant than you imagine.
And you identified that earlier in a word. I think I could safely say it's my number one value in life, and that is kindness. And as long as you are kind, it's rare to find that genuinely kind person that is not so self-involved that they have to have their way. Instead, they're thinking, how can I serve others? How can I make other people feel good? That's the legacy, Bill. That's a legacy I want to leave. I don't want to leave buildings, and I don't want to leave industries and businesses. I want to personally, for me, a legacy is if I am forgotten, but the love and kindness I demonstrated lasts for decades.
Forever, because it multiplies.
Yes.
The kind acts that you may take may have a huge impact on the people to whom you're treating kindly, and they in turn may act more kindly, and they in turn, it goes on forever. So one act of kindness can be more powerful than a nuclear bomb.
That's a pretty heavy statement. Yeah. Okay, I've got two subjects that I want to cover before we end. We've got about 15 minutes left. And I think we've probably already talked on this, but it was something I put in my notes, and and it's just something I put exclamation points around it because it struck me when you talked about deep and soft realities and the similarities of the three monotheistic religions and just the idea of deep and soft realities. Can you define those for me?
Well, I'll go back to the Tao, and I'll go back to the world of things and the world of emptiness. The deepest reality is the world of emptiness, the world of infinite potential. Soft reality, I'll call it soft, though somebody else might call it the hard realities, is what you experience on a daily basis. You're stuck in traffic. That's a hard reality. You're out of money. Oh, another hard reality. You broke up with your wife. Oh my gosh, hard realities. These are realities. They're real, but they're not nearly as real as what has created that reality. And we don't really know specifically what's created that reality. We don't know what elements of the world of emptiness, of the deep reality, are influencing our everyday reality. And from everything that I've read, including Norman Vincent Peale's Power of Positive Thinking, including Charles Honnell's The Master Key System, including Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, is all of these visionary authors have accepted that there is a divine power or a mystical power or just a power. Scientists call it different things, but there is a deeper reality. And if you can access this deeper reality, this is what Dr. and Master Sha does. He calls it Tao. And for him, this deeper reality is what gives him healing abilities. And he taps into this deeper reality, and it does alter the hard reality. Someone comes to him, and they have cancer cells, and they're told by their medical doctor they have only a few months to live. Master Sha, in many instances, not all, is able to access the deeper reality of the Tao, bring forth, he does it in a magical way to me, putting it into calligraphy, and then has the patient trace the calligraphy. And I have documented, that's why I rewrote my book, Miracle Soul Healer, because I've documented, and it's not the placebo effect, and it's working for thousands of people. So this is, for me, a very palpable, visible, deep reality impacting our everyday reality. And that's why I prefer to call what most people would say, that's the hard reality of things. Everything else is hocus pocus. You're just, daydreaming. This is the situation. You've got to deal with it. Well, that hard reality can be dealt with. Doesn't mean it's going to change overnight, and it doesn't mean that we're going to change the laws of physics, but there are deeper universal principles which do impact, whether it's manifesting wealth, whether it's manifesting good relationships, manifesting health. And there are certain individuals throughout history who have had the ability to go to what I'm calling the deep reality and bring back the energy of that reality in ways that change everyday hard reality.
I keep coming back in my mind to your emptiness, and that I think relationship with the divine is an emptiness, and it is a place of exponential it is there is room for, I'm not a fan of the word growth, but it is room for, maybe I'm evolutionary. It's room for transformation and evolution and moving on to something next. If we have that part of our psyche so filled up with knowing and I'm convinced of this fact, I'm convinced of that fact, we're hamstrung, and I think...
Well, what you're saying is so true, and it's so paradoxical, but your wording is excellent, because just think about someone who empties themselves of all ego, empties themselves of all attachment. What will fill that void? It will be the divine light of God, if you want to use the word God.
Sure.
It will be the ineffable energy that you come from. You come from nothing. You're born. You gather everything. You gather your body. You gather your strength. You gather your wit, your intelligence. You gather your accomplishments. But then, magically almost, it's by emptying your attachment to everything that makes you, that you become a higher you that is so attuned with the essence of the love of the universe that your greatest gift is in losing yourself.
Do you know who represented that in philosophically and theologically? Was Jesus coming to earth. He emptied himself of his divinity. He emptied so he could take on the fullness of humanity. If he had divinity in the midst of that would have gotten in the way, that would have fought what he was trying to do. And so there was an emptiness in the Christ. And that he voluntarily did that so he could experience life in its fullness, describe it to us in the Norman Vincent Peale 5 or 6 chapter titles that you gave me that affect everyday life, real life, that are just, they're not just religious restraints or commitments, that there is something that's going on deep inside.
Well, and it is through, suffering that, as I said earlier, that we actually often reach our highest levels, because it's only, as you're saying in the case of Jesus, had Jesus come in totally divine without any human frailties, how could he really be able to understand the human dilemma?
Right.
And it is the human dilemma, what we call the human condition.
Right.
If you look at it, very simply, you're born and you get old, you get sick probably, and then you die. That's sort of what happens for 99% of humanity.
And so why do we struggle with that so much?
What?
Why do we struggle with that so much? We just can't deal with
death
is real strong in my life right now.
The hard reality. The hard reality is, I have a body, and whatever happens to the body, that's really the only thing that matters. Well, yes, the body matters a lot. But the body probably is here. I mean, they have new breakthroughs in science. Maybe they'll break through. It would be fantastic. Instead of 100 years, you get to 200 or even 500. But still, it's limited. And there's something more important than what you're experiencing physically in your physical body. I had a near-death experience when I was just 15 years old. And I was graced with an energetic experience that was more joyful and blissful, and I've had a lot of joy and bliss in my life, than anything I've experienced through the body. So once you have that awareness, it changes your perception on what you're here to do. I'm just as committed to doing the best I can in every moment, helping clients, helping my family, having fun, having great meals, triumphing on the golf course or the tennis court or any other sport I do. I'm a human being, and I've got the same goals and ambitions, but there's a part of me that, when it's done, and let's focus on what really matters. And what really matters is actually none of that.
I have discussions with my wife. My wife is an executive coach and actually quite successful. And I am always reminding her that we are, as executive coaches, consultants, strategic planners, and whatnot, our role is one thing. We're in the service role. We are serving people. We're not giving them great answers. We're not giving them, things to do in life. We're serving them and offering them. I love to say that I'm offering options for you to consider. As a matter of fact, as an executive coach, I changed my title, Bill, from executive coach to partner in thought. And I was working with CEOs, and that's what I would work with, is just that I am just your partner. We're going to think through this together. I'm not going to present to you, a course. I'm going to present to you a process of thinking. And I must mention, I think we are in the United States so impacted by the age of reason and enlightenment that we are trying to put the scientific method to define the deep realities. You cannot use the scientific method to define deep realities.
Well, I agree with you, and one of the accomplishments I'm actually most proud of is my role in tapping the source, both the film and the summits that we've been giving. And we'll connect you so that you can post on your website. We're offering free viewings of this film.
Oh,
the film was
yeah.
done about 15 years ago. We're reissuing it with updated technology. And we interviewed over 100 stars, people like Muriel Hemingway, Jack Canfield, Michael Beckwith of Agape, a who's who of business leaders. And we asked all of them, what is your source of happiness, and how do you maintain contact with that source of happiness?
Oh, would you send that to me? Can you send that to me in the next couple of days so I can get it on the show notes for when we publish it?
We'll get it out to you, immediately.
That would be great.
What was so interesting was, of all these wonderful people, almost all of them said the same thing. They said their major source of happiness was, one, finding a way to express gratitude every single day, and two, finding a way to be of service to others. And then the third most important thing was finding a way to connect with nature. These are people that have led exemplary lives.
How do I wanted to end the show, but you presented a question that hits me. How do I, in Tustin, California, living in a neighborhood of tiny boxes, and there's a lot of not a lot of nature, I miss nature. How do I have to just take special trips to go out and do it?
No, nature, some of us are more fortunate than others. It starts with a tree. Hopefully you can find a tree. Just one tree is a start. If you went to the same tree every day and talked to that tree and hugged the tree and just realized the knowledge that tree has. We think of trees, we think of all biological entities as passive without human intelligence. They don't have human intelligence, but they're part of an energetic. That's why it's so important to connect with nature. It's important to connect with the energy that is closer to the divine.
Yeah, it's part of creation
human
intent.
Beings, whether it's a beautiful building or a beautiful car, it's a man-made object. You need man-made objects, but you also need natural. So even if it's just connecting with a tree, that's a good place to start.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you what, this has been so much fun, and obviously you and I could go on for a bit, but it's time to wrap the show up. And Bill Gladstone, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. What a fantastic journey this has been. Thank you for your insight.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and just be sure to send me an email right as soon as the show's over with the right email, and I will forward your email to my partner in the reissuance of the Tapping the Source film and make sure that he provides a link so that anyone listening to your website, to the show, or going to your website over the next week has free access to the film.
Okay, do I have you? Yeah, your email address is on the information that I got, right? Okay,
yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank
I also
you,
want to
and you
thank
have a
our...
wonderful evening and a wonderful weekend.
Hang in there just a minute. I just want to thank our listeners for tuning in to The Next Chapter with Charlie, and be sure to check us out at our website, thenextchapter.life. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.